to get talking, right?
Yeah, it's always a challenge.
David is one of the early African-American grads from the School of Engineering, and he's also been an entrepreneur at Bell. He was at Bell Labs, one of the premier, I guess I call it the NASA of thinking, not just about aeronautical, but all kinds of inventions have come out of there. What are some of the things we would know, David, out of Bell Labs?
Like the transistor.
Transistor, all right, there we go.
Communications satellite, the Unix operating system, the C programming language,
Wow.
lots of things that are still, relevant in the world.
Excellent. Yeah. And then he moved from there to start his own telecommunications business and hit that at the right time. He started it out of his basement with a few friends and had a few lean years there, right? And then it took off, and he's been a very successful entrepreneur. He lived out east for quite a while and then came back to Michigan, Flint native, and he'll be talking a little bit more about his story. Reggie also from Flint. Reggie, you guys were neighbors growing up, right?
Absolutely. I've been knowing David since the second grade or first grade.
Wow. Did he have his beard then?
No, that beard is new, but it looks nice.
Looks nice. He would have been a little odd as a second grader, but so
he was Reggie, odd all the time, though.
Yeah, Reggie went the route of working within organization and was a salesperson for IBM for many years, right? After going to Notre Dame and playing football there under Era Sarsegian, right?
Absolutely. National champions too, 1973.
Did he have a 10-year, $10 million contract, $100 million contract?
No, he did not.
Boy, I bet he wishes he was born in this era.
I think every coach in my era wishes that.
Yeah. And then Reggie, you also started your own business. Is that correct, Reggie?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Started a business and we're doing something that was called WRN Inc. And the company did networking infrastructure.
Excellent. And Reggie, you've not only gone to the Michigan rival of Notre Dame, but the other Michigan basketball rival of Duke. So
yes, absolutely. I had to give you guys a double dose.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, I'm going to get going with the program. Basically, just what we're going to do, we're going to have Reggie and David talk about their own lives and about Flint, and we're going to do that for a while, and then we're going to have opportunities for all of you to break into breakout rooms and talk about your thoughts about some of the things they're saying. We're going to pose a question to you and do that for about 10 minutes. And then we'll come back with comments and questions. So that'll be the program. So, you're welcome to all turn on your cameras if you want. And then we're going to get going from there. So we'll kick it over to you guys. I don't know who's going to start.
I think I'm going to start today. Correct, David?
Okay, Reggie, you're on.
All righty. What I'd like to do is kind of give a little background about myself, a little bit beyond what you're giving, Dr. Rob. First of all, my parents are Oscar and Dora Barnett from Rising, Arkansas. Both are deceased now. They had 8 children. I'm the 7th of the 8th, 5 boys and 3 girls. 7 of us were born in Rising, and then my last brother was born in Flint, Michigan. That's going to become pertinent as we go through the rest of the story. I also currently, I have been married for 36 years to my lovely wife, Bernadette Barnett, and I have 2 children who I think are signing on. My oldest daughter is an executive at Teladoc, one of the, I think, the largest remote healthcare company in the world. And
she's waving to you, Reggie.
Oh, okay. Good. And my second daughter is the inside attorney and exec at a developing company in the Washington, D.C. area. So to all of them, hello. And I always like to do them first because I forget at the end. Let me turn over to talking about my early childhood. First of all, Dave and I, besides knowing each other since the second grade, also share in common that we are the great migration babies. Between 1910 and 1970, about 6 million African Americans migrated from the South to the West Coast and to major cities in the Midwest and major cities on the East Coast. I mentioned that because I think if you go back and look at first generation great migration kids, I think that we all have a lot in common. First of all, why did our parents migrate? I think our parents migrate for a simple reason. Simple reason is that they wanted a better life. They were seeking employment, and they were seeking, as I said, greater opportunities for both them and the children. I think when you go back and look at that, as I said, I think you're going to find out that there's a lot in common with that particularly that first group. We lived in when we started our migration. My father originally wanted to stay in Arkansas. My father had progressed through the major employer in this small town, and I say small town, about 1,000 people, probably less than 1,000 people now. But he had moved up, and he had become close friends with the owners. The owner's son was actually he and my father were similar ages. And he and my father had a great conversation about should he migrate to Michigan, come to Flint, or should he stay in Arkansas? My father and he decided that my father should come up to Flint, stay there for a couple of months, then come back, and they would talk about what to do. He'd hold his job, those kind of things. So my father came up to Flint. He came back, and he talked to fellow's name was Herschel Garner Jr. And Herschel and my dad talked, and Herschel discussed how my father had progressed through the company. He was now a commercial truck driver. He did some other things for the company. And he said, look, go home, Oscar, come back tomorrow. Tell me what it takes to keep you here. We really want you to stay here. And it sounds like you'd like to stay here in Arkansas. My father went home, came back and said, Herschel, it's going to cost $100 a week to stay. It's back in 1955. My father and Herschel said, look, I think that's reasonable, Oscar. He said, all I like to do is take it over to my dad. So my father and Herschel Jr. walked into Herschel Sr.'s office, and Herschel Jr. said, look, Dad, I think there's a way we can keep Oscar with us. He said that he needs to be paid $100 a week. Herschel Sr. looked at my dad, and he looked at Herschel Jr., and he said, look, I don't know any N-word in Rising that's worth $100 a week. That's when we decided we were coming to Flint. My father came back home, obviously disappointed. Herschel Jr. Came back and talked to my father extensively. As I told you, they were great friends. And Herschel Jr. actually helped us move to Flint. So that's how we got to Flint. That's how things got started for us. We moved to Flint. In what I believe was the greatest neighborhood in Flint for us. We moved into what is now considered the cultural area of Flint. It was the greatest community for us because it had so many opportunities and so many things for us to do. While David ventured over into the science fair and some other things, I was academically inclined, but I was also very interested in a wide range of things, obviously sports. That area, we had everything that you could imagine to do. We had the library, we had the art center, we had the culinary center, we had a couple of museums, we had Mott College, we had they had the Flint, U of M Flint. All of those things were in that area.
Don't forget the planetarium.
Oh, I forget the plant. By the way, I could not forget the planetarium because when it got too hot in the summer, that was a nice, cool place to lay back and watch the stars. So yes, we even had the planetarium. So we had all those things. And a great piece of it was my parents felt that it was very important, and that's why we stayed in that area, very important to use them all. My mother told me that those resources are there and they're there to be used, and I want all my kids to use them. Plus, having 8 kids, she also wanted us to go someplace during the day. So I grew up using all the facilities, and I think that that was one of the things that made me who I am today. Walker School, Whittier, and Central, as I said, also gave us great opportunities. I got a chance to understand about high school, even when I was in grade school, because we go over and watch them play football. We were able to participate in everything. As I look at from that period, the things that I learned, including my father, the time with my father, hard work pays off, take risks, and you never know who's going to help you. Help comes from unexpected places, from people you don't know sometimes. Because, as I told you, piece about Herschel Garner, but also when we got to Flint, while people talked about it down south as if the roads were paved with gold, the initial years of Flint were kind of difficult. The factories in the early years in the 50s sometimes took long periods off, and they laid off the employees with less seniority. So my dad went through periods of time where he did not work, and obviously with 8 kids, that was very difficult. He happened to meet another fellow. This is why I told you that help comes from unexpected places. That was a owned a construction company. And anytime that my father didn't work in Buick or at Chevrolet, he employed my father, and we got a chance to ride all around the state of Michigan doing construction and learning the Upper Peninsula, the upper parts of state of Michigan that I have yet to some of them return, but also I found Michigan to be a very beautiful state, and I've actually learned a lot. Now going back to Flint though, besides the resources that were there, we benefited from a major development. It was called the Community Education Movement. That was a combination between the C.S. Mott Foundation and Frank Manley, who was a University of Michigan grad, and they put together the community school systems. That allowed the school systems to stay open most of the day. So the community director would have schools open after school hours, and he would invite and have things for both your parents, also for those at school age. And the bottom line was they wanted to keep the community as a community, and more so to allow us to have activities during off hours. I found that to be very valuable, and we were a model school system in that respect. At Walker, I'm sure Dave remembers these days. C.S. Mott used to come in himself, and we would get visitors from around the world come in with him. But in particular, when C.S. Mott came in, we knew to be on our best behavior. If you wanted to get disciplined, do something when the man was in the school system. The bottom line is that, all jokes aside, I think that was a very great opportunity for us to all grow. Coming from a family of that large, there were a number of things that also I learned and was very helpful in that period of time for me, but also as I grew older. Number one, I talked about this, always use all the resources available to you. Number two, discipline. Because we were such a large family, my parents had to put us on a regiment. You went to school, you came back home, you ate dinner, you studied. Then if you had time, you can do extracurricular activities. Obviously for me, I went to school, I played sports, came home and ate, and then I studied. So that was a part of it. Number three, don't be afraid to take risks, both for success and failure. It's very important to take risks. It's very important to fail, and it's very important to be successful sometimes. And don't fear either one of those. Believe it or not, I think more people fear success than failure. Last but not least, expectations. There's nothing wrong with expectations. There's nothing wrong with you expecting your child to perform. There's nothing wrong with your child performing. And I always had expectations because, being a seventh one through, every teacher already knew about the family. Everyone had the expectations and they were set high, and you had to perform. So with that said, those were my days and my memories in Flint. I can go on. I don't know how much time has elapsed. I don't want to go over my time, but I will talk about Notre Dame and my business career, Duke, those kind of things if you have time. But I have not been checking the time. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, well, I think we'll get, why don't you just take another 2-3 minutes, and tell us what happened once you got to Notre Dame, and your few things about your career. I mean, this is about inspiring the group here to know that they can be successful regardless of whatever the obstacles are.
Right. Notre Dame was Notre Dame. First of all, when I was graduating, I was all state in track and football. Football, I was all American, so I had a lot of offers. Obviously, offered to Notre Dame, and I also had offers to Michigan, Michigan State, Nebraska, Oklahoma. Not going to go through that list, but I chose Notre Dame for a couple of reasons, and I think this is important too. Number one, Notre Dame was close to home, so my parents could come see me play, but it's far enough from home that they wouldn't come to visit me during the week. So that was lovely. So I went to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was a cultural shock. First of all, Notre Dame, when I started, was an all-male school. That meant two things. That meant that we were treated like everyone's son. So we had our laundry done, we had our beds made, we had all our meals cooked. And so we were treated, like I said, in some respects, as if we were someone's son, and that was great. What I also learned at Notre Dame, and is passed and it helped me at Duke and everywhere else that I matriculated, is that if you go to class every day and you listen and you do your work, you can graduate with honors, and you can have success. And I believe that goes through life. So I have nothing bad to say about Notre Dame. I was fed free. I was given summer jobs to be clothed. I had the prettiest girl on campus, and I had a great life. There was one thing that happened in particular at Notre Dame I'd like to mention, though, going back to the theme that you never know who's going to help you. One day I went to the liberal arts administration building, and I walked in. It's a snowy day at Notre Dame. This time of year, it just snows all the time. I walked in this time of the year, and immediately as I walked in the door, I turned to my left, and I walked into the administrative office. I had to get something taken care of. I had my hat on. I had snow everywhere. And from out of the blue, someone yells out to me, "Take your hat off." Okay, I got a beautiful life. I took my hat off. I took a seat and waited for them to help me. During that time that I was waiting, this gentleman comes up to me and he says, "Can I introduce myself?" He says, "Sure, sir." His name was Dean Pye. I don't know if any of you know who Dean Pye was, but Dean Pye was the dean of the Duke Law School. He later went on and actually was the provost of the school for many years, the whole school. Dean Pye came over and says, "Reggie, I've got your name over here." He says, "Have you ever thought about going to law school?" I said, "Dean, no offense, but I think I'm going to be a pro football player." He says, "Look, you were treated wrongly. You handled it right. I've heard some things about you. I think you should consider law school." I said, "Okay, Dean, I got one problem. Come from a family of 8 kids. I have no money. What are you going to do for me?" Dean actually gave me a full scholarship. And that's how, after my draft days at San Diego Chargers, I was able to go to law school. And I say that because, once again, you never know who's going to help you. From there, went to Duke, great time. Got back down south. Went to IBM, and I went to IBM for a number of reasons, mostly to the fact that IBM recruited me hard, and they said that we will move you and you will see the world not so clearly. I was
Reggie,
going
I gotta
to
ask you
see.
a question. Did they offer you $100 a week?
Oh, at that time, that $100 a week had moved up. Actually, when you look at when even my father asked for that $100, Ford was paying $106 at the time, and in modern days, that in 2020, that $100 worth $1,037. So they offered me actually a lot more than that $100.
That's good. That's good.
But I appreciate that.
I think Melissa appreciates that too. So that you got well taken care of, right, Melissa? Reggie, just in terms of time, I'm gonna turn things over to David now for a few minutes, and then we can get back.
All righty, that's why I didn't want to go over time, but we'll answer questions later.
Okay, Mr. Tarver.
Reggie and I, we get together, quite often. We could do this for a couple of days, so we can go, we can talk. And as Reggie indicated, we've known each other since we were kids. And not only that, but, high school graduation, we were in my little Austin, America, driving across the city of Flint, singing Sly and the Family Stone songs at the top of our lungs. And when I got married, he was there. He got married, I was there. 50th birthdays, all these kinds of things. So, we've stayed in touch over the years. He's really one of my closest friends, if not the closest. As Reggie indicated, we grew up in Flint together. He was on 7th Street. I was on 6th Street. We went to Walker Elementary School together. Before I get into that, I'll just say that My parents also migrated to Flint from the South. They were from Georgia. And actually, my grandfather was in Flint. He was from Yazoo City, Mississippi. And after World War I, he actually served in World War I. And after World War I, he went to Flint and established a cleaning business near the entrance to the Buick City factory, the Buick Motor Division factory, because he knew there'd be a lot of dirty clothes coming out of there. And so my family history in Flint actually goes back to 1917. But my folks, my grandmother and my grandfather had some troubles. My grandfather was kind of a womanizer and had some issues with alcohol. And so my grandmother actually had to leave with the kids and go back to Georgia in the 30s. And so my mother and father came back to Flint around 1950. And my father had served in the U.S. Army during World War II. He was a radio operator in the Aleutian Islands. I don't know how my father got interested in electronics, if he had learned electronics and radio technology in the Army, or if he had started, before the Army, but he served in the Army during World War II. My mother went to nursing school in Atlanta while he was in the service. And my mother graduated. I actually have her diploma around here somewhere. She graduated from what was called the Grady Hospital in Atlanta, still a huge hospital there, but she graduated from the Grady Colored School of Nursing in Atlanta. And a couple years later, she and my father were living in Albany, Georgia. And similar story to how Reggie's folks ended up migrating to Flint. My mother was working as a nurse in the hospital there, Phoebe Hospital in Albany, one night, and she had to pee, quite frankly. And so she ducked into the nearest bathroom. The hospital was divided into a white side and a colored side. And in between there was a passageway. She ducked into a bathroom that was near the passageway, but it happened to be a whites only bathroom. And one of her superiors saw her coming out of that bathroom, and she was severely reprimanded for using the white bathroom. And that's the point at which my parents decided to move to Flint. And my mother got a job at Hurley Hospital in Flint, which is, I think, still the largest hospital in the city limits. She had her salary doubled from what she was making in Albany, Georgia. And she eventually became the assistant director of nursing at Hurley Hospital, the first Black nursing administrator in the city of Flint. And my father got a job at the post office, first delivering mail and then as a postal technician. And so neither of my parents actually worked for General Motors. I think my father tried to work for Buick for about a week, and he found that it was not for him. He didn't like that hard labor in the pit at Buick. And so he decided, well, I'll try this mail delivery thing out. And so that's kind of how my family got to Flint, Michigan. I have two older siblings. My sister, Bernice, passed away actually in 2005, but she was a nurse also. And my brother, Fred, is living between Flint and Grand Blanc and South Carolina, Hilton Head. And he was a pharmacist for many years. He retired a few years back, went to Ferris State as a pharmacy student. He was the first person in our family to go to a 4-year university. I think actually the pharmacy program was 5 years. And so, one of the things I want to stress about, this story and this day and this whole situation in Flint is a lot bigger than me and Reggie. I think you're hearing from our story, our siblings were successful, right? And people throughout our neighborhood. Reggie says we lived in the best neighborhood in Flint. We really did, but Flint in the 1960s had the second highest per capita income in the United States. And we had great opportunities. We had great schools, we had great teachers. We had lots of opportunities in the neighborhood. And so you can go up and down each of those streets and I can identify people that we grew up with. There's a lawyer here, there's a manager there, there's a police officer, there's a this, you know, I don't remember too many people who didn't do well, you know, coming out of our neighborhood. And that was a real lesson for us in that, you know, when people have, families have access to jobs and opportunity, you know, people generally do well. And I don't think it was any hard science to it. That's just the way things worked out. So as Reggie alluded to, so my father, you know, he couldn't get a job in the electronics industry. There wasn't even much of an electronics industry in Flint in those days. He loved electronics. He loved radio and television. And so he had a little workshop in the basement where he would fix radios and TVs for people in the neighborhood as a sidelight. And so that's how I got familiar with and interested in electronics. And we had the science fair in Flint. It was 1963, I think was the first year I participated in science fair. I was 10 years old. And it was a few years after Sputnik, you know, and there was this craze in the United States that, you know, we're falling behind. The Russians have launched this Sputnik and, you know, we better get on it as far as science. And so we had these science fairs all over the country. They were doing this. And in Flint, science fair, you know, nowadays, my youngest daughter actually is participating in something around here called Science Olympiad. And it's like the few smart kids, this kind of thing. But then everybody had to participate in the science fair. Everybody had to have a project. And so everybody learned something about the scientific method and everybody had to take their project down to the IMA auditorium and have it judged and, you know, this sort of thing. So again, it was this very inclusive situation and inclusive community. And so, you know, I started at the science fair in the 4th grade and I ended up being a finalist all 4 years of high school. And that just spurred me on to think, okay, you know, this whole science and electronics thing is for you. Let me step back. I mentioned my youngest daughter, Nadia. She's in 8th grade. I have an older daughter, Stacy, who graduated from NYU and Columbia. And she led digital marketing for Nike in China for a couple of years and came back and working with venture capital company. And she's in New York City. My son, Aaron, actually graduated from University of Michigan, the business school there in 2011. He has his own consulting company now in New York in the healthcare business, healthcare industry.
Did I hear you tell us that you had a grandchild on the way?
Got a grandchild on the way this month. My son and his wife are expecting their first child. So it'll be my first grandchild. That's why I'm growing this beard. You know, I want to look the part. So at any rate, you know, coming through elementary school, I won't, you know, retell all the things, but we just had some great teachers and we had really great opportunities. I'm gonna tell a little story about Reggie because we had people who cared about us, you know, and it wasn't always apparent. We had Black teachers and white teachers, right? But we came along in this unique time when our schools were integrated. Our high school, we went to Central High School in the early 1970s. It was 70% white, 30% Black, right? In junior high school, very integrated school system. In 8th grade, we had this teacher, I can't even remember her name now. Reggie, you remember her name? I know you remember her name. Anyway, we were in an 8th grade class. I think it was English class. And Reggie had this habit, you know, Reggie's folks from Arkansas, and you know, we all had our little affectations, you know, coming along. Reggie used to say, instead of saying north and south, he would say north and south, you know, we going up north, or, you know, whatever. And so this teacher, you know, called Reggie out on that. Reggie, you have to say north. And Reggie, you know, he was kind of a rebellious, you know, guy anyway. So she made Reggie stand out in the hall in front of the class and made him go out. And, you know, nowadays that might cause some consternation. People's parents might come to school and protest. Reggie went out in the hall, and she pulled Reggie aside. She said, Reggie, I really care about you. You have great potential. I want you to realize that, and I want you to, you know, correct this. I want you to do the right thing. And he did, right? And Reggie ended up graduating top of class in high school, as well as, you know, his great sports career. And, you know, you heard the rest of the stuff. But, you know, when people care, it makes a tremendous difference. And I had people who similarly cared during my career. And I left high school, went to General Motors Institute. And the reason I applied to University of Michigan, I was accepted at Michigan. I applied to Harvard. I was not accepted at Harvard coming out of high school. And had a chance to go to MIT after 1 year at GMI as a transfer student. But my father said 5 words that determined that I was going to be going to GMI. He said, GMI is free, boy. And in those days, GMI was was a cooperative school. It was you got paid during your work experience, and that more than paid for your tuition and other costs at school. And so he said, you know, he couldn't think of why you would want to go to a university and pay all this money if you could go to college for free. And so I went to GMI for 2 years, but after 2 years, I decided that, you know, I was interested in things other than the automotive industry. And so I was able to transfer to University of Michigan, graduated from there, bachelor's and master's degree. And then I went to work for this AT&T Bell Laboratories in New Jersey. And it was a time when everything was a first, right? So it was a first wave of African-American people being hired as engineers and scientists, you know, at places like Bell Labs, places like IBM. But I went there thinking that, not thinking I wanted to build a career there, but thinking I wanted to get enough experience to start my own company. And after 7 years there, I stepped out and started a company with a couple of buddies of mine who I had met at Bell Labs. We started a company in my basement. And we actually incorporated the company in 1984. We actually only had 1 lean year. And after that, things went pretty well. We sold the company in 1995 to a British outfit. And, you know, that's what's caused me to be a vagrant ever since then. I haven't had to, get out there and scrap for things since then. But so that's, you know, in a nutshell, the story, of how I got here. I came back to Michigan in 2007. My mother was getting older. As I said, my sister had passed away. Wanted to spend some quality time with my mother, and we had like 6 really good years together after moving back here. Got involved back at the university, started teaching in the Center for Entrepreneurship. So
He's away from his mic.
happy being
I
here.
want to give people the opportunity. Oh, sure, yeah. We give people the opportunity to maybe ask some questions now. We're going to be a little tight for time in terms of breaking into breakout groups, but I wonder if people might ask a question, and I see a lot of great comments already in the chat line, but if you could just, I can't see some of you, so if you just kind of break in and say, hey, this is this is Anthony, and I want to ask David or make a comment about something Reggie said or whatever. So let's break into that and talk about these gentlemen's careers and all the opportunities that were at Flint, and anything you might want to share about your stories that are similar, or ask them questions. So I'll give you that opportunity now, whoever wants to get started. I'm going to call on Demond because I know Demond always has something interesting to say. So Demond, are you out there?
I am here. And I tell you, I'm just like that student that's in the class saying, man, I hope the professor didn't call on me first. And look what happens. So I tell you, I had the opportunity. I don't know if you remember, Mr. Tarver, but we had the opportunity to speak some years ago at the Leaders Connect, and what an honor. You didn't have the fancy beard back then. But I tell you, what an honor. And some people I remember, from Leaders Connect as well. I don't really have a question. I just kind of have a comment. I've been secretly following your career, Mr. Tarver, for quite some years, and yours as well, Dr. Rob. And I want to thank you all for the things that you do, because I kind of pattern what I'm doing. I like to still say I'm a young entrepreneur, but probably not. But I like to pattern a lot of things that I do. I took the short, long route with 21 years in the military. And then, of course, I started after retiring from there.
I just want to say that's another pathway. You're talking about opportunity. And I know the military gave you opportunity, Demond.
Yeah. So, and again, and that's why I just wanted to comment and say that I take that military experience, but I also take the real life experiences that I get to see you all go through. And again, really just thank you for setting the tone and paving the way for, entrepreneurs like myself.
All right, anybody else want to make a comment? I see Daniel Curran out there. Daniel, you made some comments. You want to share something that you're working on?
Well, actually, I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
It occurred to me that both David and Reggie shared how they benefited from their parents migrating to a place with more opportunity. And I was wondering, what do you think that looks like today? Are there places, hotspots in the US where it would make sense for me, for my children, for my grandchildren to move to that place to take advantage of that swell of opportunity? And then also, how do you balance between that and sticking with a place that is really important or has potential?
Reggie, you want to take that?
Oh, you can go ahead, but I will say this before you add your comments. Number one, I think that you have to make the similar decision. Where is the best place for me now to better myself and better my family and have an opportunity? And that question, as Dave and I have talked about many times, is the same question that Amazon posed when they were saying they were going to build 4 new headquarters. They had all the cities send in the information, and they had tried to select for their employees where was the greatest and best opportunity. And that similar format is something that I would suggest that you look at. And while as a person that's moved many, many times and been around the world, one of the things I've done at IBM is had a world responsible job that I traveled. I think that's the question that's being asked amongst people of your age across the world. And I think that you have to make that decision. And like I said, I think that Amazon picked some wonderful places, and those are some places that I would first look at personally. And my only regret is that Flint has not got themselves in a position to have been on that list.
Yeah. When I graduated from Michigan, I looked around at where was the best place for me to build my career, and I went to Bell Labs in New Jersey. New Jersey was the last place I wanted to live, and when I got there, I absolutely hated New Jersey, but I knew that that's where Bell Labs was, and that's where I needed to, if I wanted to, gain the expertise and make the contacts I needed to start a company, I knew that that's where I needed to go. And so, that's where I went. But, you're in Flint, and I know you've done some great things in Flint, Daniel, and you've really been a great citizen there and promoting a lot of technology and entrepreneurship. It hurts me to see what has happened in Flint. Even though we had a lot of great opportunities in our day, and things moved positively for us in Flint. In the 1960s, we were really living still in a segregated town. It was internally segregated. Blacks lived in certain communities, whites lived in different communities. But then the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, and Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. And in 1968, Flint passed the first open housing ordinance in the United States of America, which meant that people in the city could live anywhere, right? So now you had all these people who basically had the same income. Everybody worked at General Motors. Everybody was middle class. People could live in any neighborhood they wanted to. We had extreme white flight as a result of those changes. So we had white flight, and then we had corporate flight as a result of that. And then we had middle class flight. And Flint has never been the same. And just as a general matter, the thing that I worry about is that this division and this inability to live together that happened in Flint and really had a devastating impact on Flint, we're facing that across the country now. And I worry that the country is going to be in the same state if we don't resolve, this inability to live together. So that's just kind of a general philosophical point. But to answer your question specifically, I think it's worthwhile to look at some of these places that, where you can be fed intellectually and professionally, and your family and your children can have the kinds of great opportunities. If I were a young person today starting my career, I think I'd look at Austin, Texas. I'm a great admirer of what Elon Musk is doing down there. I would look at, Virginia, where, Amazon is doing great. I mean, there's so many great things going on from a professional standpoint around the country. And I think you have to consider those things and weigh that against what can I do here to help build and grow the community I'm in. And that's a decision each person has to make.
Dr. Rob, could I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to echo what David and Reggie said. Thank you so much both for sharing. I was about 10 years behind you, but I can relate to so much of what you said. I went to a couple of the same schools. I knew the cultural center well. Also had the experience of great neighborhoods, even in the 70s, great schools, teachers who cared, integrated high schools. I can relate to all of that and how all of those are positive influences. I'm wondering now, though, and I know, David, I don't know as much about you, Reggie, in terms of what you're doing now, but I know, David, you've tried to do some things and maybe are doing some things there now in Flint. What's your take on the one or two things that Flint expats and friends of Flint can do to kind of plug in and try to shift some things around?
Well, actually, Reggie and I together back in 2014, we started this organization called Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative. If you take a step back and look at what needs to be done and how can people get involved, what can people do, what's missing in Flint and in a lot of urban areas, but in particular places like Flint, Pontiac, Saginaw, there's a shortage of business innovation, right? If you look at the places where change is occurring, turnaround is occurring, it's generally led by some entrepreneurs who have had some success in building businesses. So in Detroit, you've got, Illich, you've got Gilbert, people like this who are taking initiative and doing things in Grand Rapids, the Van Andels, and these folks. In Flint, when we were growing up, it was Charles Stewart Mott. Reggie referred to Charles. He was the Bill Gates of his day, right? He was the man. And where is that in Flint? Who is that today in Flint? What company is establishing itself in Flint and building opportunity? It's absent. And so what we're trying to do, what Reggie and I have been trying to do in our own, kind of small and quiet way, is to facilitate more attention to these situations. And it's not, you can't do it just with small entrepreneurs, just with startup entrepreneurs. It has to be done in a way that is substantial, and where you have, significant businesses that are coming to take advantage of the opportunity that's there for maybe lower cost and access to workers and that kind of thing.
I see that Dewan has his hand up. I just want to mention something real quickly. And if Megan, you could put this in chat for me, but I have groups for entrepreneurs, and I would have some openings now, and I'm willing to provide some scholarships for those. So if anybody would like to join one of my entrepreneurial groups, where you meet with a group of 10 other entrepreneurs, business leaders, some of them are more well-established, but I'd like to get more diversity in those groups. So please contact me if you'd like to join a monthly entrepreneurs group. And we're going to do this through Zoom, so you don't have to be right in Ann Arbor to do it. I've been running these for 25 years, and so I'd like to add some folks to that. Damon, you might be a really good member if you are interested. And just making connections, Anthony, I see somebody out there who also has a janitorial business. You might want to contact that person. And I think Joan also asked you to contact. So Anthony, put a little bit more in your bio about what you're looking for on the chat line. But let's go
Absolutely.
to Dewan. Got your hand up there, Dewan?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, and I look forward to with the information you guys put in the chat, so I can join in. I'm definitely interested in being a part of a group as a young entrepreneur. My question for Mr. Tarver and Mr. Barnett is, the fact that they've been entrepreneurs for so long, is what type of sacrifices did you guys have to make, to kind of get to the point to where you are now? If you can go in that a little bit.
I guess I'll start by saying entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. There's sacrifices, because the bottom line, the profit line, is yours. There's no one to look to left or to right. There's no one to blame. You've got to make that. You got to make the profit. You've got to make the money. So I tell people that if you are not willing to dedicate yourself and willing to work hard, the entrepreneurship is not a way to slough off. It is a dedicated, hard work effort. That's number one. I'll leave some time for you, Mr. Tarver.
Well, I'm just going to give an anecdote. It's incredibly hard work, but and that's why people say you have to be doing what you love. But the anecdote I'll tell is that every Sunday night, it's been long. I sold my business, 25 years ago, 27 years ago, right? And it's been, a lot longer than that since I was in engineering school. Every Sunday night, I get nervous, right? Because Sunday night, I had to get myself together and be ready to go into the office and deal with my employees, or when I was in school, I had to finish whatever problem sets and all this work that I was doing. And that has never left me. I couldn't just sit there and watch football games on Sunday night and, this kind of, and so I'm nervous to this day. On Sunday, I could just sit around all week if I wanted to, right? It's not, but that muscle memory is still there, that, and so a lot of what you sacrifice is you just have to constantly work it. You're constantly working. It's not, you don't go home at 5 o'clock and not think about your business anymore. It's something that you wake up in the middle of the night dreaming about. First thing in the morning, you jotting down thoughts about what you need to do and what you didn't do the day before and how to strategize about this or that. And so it takes over your life, and it has, big impacts. But if you want to do it, you want to do it.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Dewan, you want to just say what your business is? It sounds pretty innovative itself.
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the owner of a cleaning company called Clean Moves. We clean, you move. We're a commercial residential cleaning company that specializes in moving and move out cleaning here in the Washington, D.C. area. And eventually we're going to be everywhere. Maybe we'll have one in Flint one day.
So I think Anthony Harden, that's a good place for you to connect, because Anthony got into a business quickly. Anthony, are you out there still?
Oh yeah, I'm still here. Just got back. Actually, I just got back from a job a second ago.
Okay, so you to me, you had a beautiful example of jumping on opportunity. Could you say what business you started after the pandemic started?
In the construction industry, working as a steel broker.
I can't hear you too well. Your mic is coming in and out.
And then obviously COVID hit, was laid off, and at the time. What about now? Can you guys hear me?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay. Actually, let me try to throw some headphones on. But I was working in the construction industry, was laid off due to the pandemic, and which forced me to pivot. And at the time, I was attending Eastern Michigan and a master's program and a product that could help the community. The only thing that was on the news was COVID. So I was like, hey, what can I do to help the community, businesses? I searched for this technology, electrostatic disinfectant technology, invested in it with my unemployment money. Didn't look back. I took a big risk. One thing led to another, and it ended up turning into a very profitable business over the last 2 years. And recently, pivoted into janitorial business as well. So again, both my parents are entrepreneurs. I've always had that mindset, and I know you got to believe, even if you can't see it, you still got to believe it. So that's where I'm at right now.
I think that's a great example of entrepreneurship. Often, if it's not technology that's going to break through, you got to look for pain, and people with pain need pain. And that's what Anthony came up with, was to go into homes and spray. Remember, we were all spraying. He was going into businesses that needed to be sure that they didn't have COVID. That's when we thought it was being carried by the surface. So it's a great idea, but then you got to go to the next step when that problem goes away. So I think that's a great example. We're going to keep rolling a little bit, even though we're at 9 o'clock, but there's a lot of great comments and questions, and Leaders Connect is about connecting. So we want to be sure that people help each other out here as we're going along.
Can I just interject something here, Dr. Rob? Because you had asked before what people could do, right? And one thing I forgot to mention, and I know Reggie benefited from too, we had this culture in Flint of apprenticeship, of internship, right? And so when I was in high school, I worked at Chevrolet Metal Fabricating in the afternoon. I left high school 1 o'clock, went to Chevrolet Metal Fab, worked in the engineering department. When I was at General Motors Institute, I worked at AC Sparkplug. By the time I started a business, I had seen so much of business. I was ready. It was natural. And so one of the things I think people can do is to continue this culture of involving young people in your businesses, and bring them on as apprentices and as interns, and give them some early experience of, in whatever field that you're in. I'm reading Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. It's what's the guy's name? Isaacson wrote
Walter Isaacson.
Walter, yeah, I'm reading his biography of Benjamin Franklin, and the culture in those days was so strong like when you're 12 years old, you're apprentice to somebody, right? As a printer or a candle maker, and you're indebted to do that for like 9 years. And when you come out, you have your career. We don't want to be that extreme these days, but we had something similar to that. And we had all kinds of what I would consider job experiences from the time we were teenagers, early teenagers. And
I think both of us even spent some time at Consumer Power.
Everybody else,
times in high school.
we got some feedback, so everybody else, thank you. Go ahead, Reggie.
I was just mentioning David's correct. He and I have actually didn't even know. I didn't even know until we got older that we both spent time at Consumer Powers, for example, doing similar things in different years during high school. So I agree with David on the apprenticeship piece, and the apprenticeship piece applies to both entrepreneurs, and we have to have a push to have all the larger businesses too. When I was at IBM, I had a push to have summer youth programs and have people work for me. So I think it is incumbent to ask all of the employers in Flint to look at that, not just one side, but big and small companies alike.
Ferris, are you out there? Ferris,
yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Ferris has done an amazing amount of work trying to promote some of this entrepreneurship and economic growth. You're working all over the world, right, doing this, Ferris? You have any questions for the gentleman?
Well, sure. I mean, I think I've been fortunate to have seen their, one of them at least, their journey, and I'd love to hear just the thought of, when you're starting, for those, as you transition from one venture to another, as you started this new venture, or you started your new move, you started teaching at school, whatever point of life that you want to discuss, would be awesome to hear your insights of what you did to self-talk yourself into the next gig that you are moving into, leaving, that you just must have, either reached a milestone in your life, or it was, you reached a downtime of your life to move to the next thing. I'd love to hear what some of the thoughts that went through your mind and talks that you were telling yourself to keep yourself moving forward.
Reggie, Reggie started a business after his career at IBM. I think I would like to hear that myself. What caused, how was that transition?
Well, the transition itself was something that I actually started while I was at IBM. I actually was in IBM services organization, and we did the Detroit airport, now the Delta terminal, and there was a company that did great services for us. I looked at that company and I decided to buy that company because of the job they had done. And I knew that they had the talent to run themselves for a while, so I did not actually transition over to them originally, but over time I transitioned over from IBM to run that company. So I made the move pretty seamlessly in that respect, in that I never missed a meal. I never really was in dire straits. But I will say this, when I started with IBM, a fellow came up to me and said, Reggie, you need to be on your own. You need to not be here. He said, I will tell you what happened to me. IBM was the doghouse. They tied a string around me and I walked around the doghouse too many years. All of a sudden, before I knew it, when they cut the leash, I still continued to walk around the doghouse. Don't stay too long. If you have the spirit to be an entrepreneur, go do what you want to do.
It's a great story.
Yep, great story.
I have a question for you, gentlemen, and that's about the white-black relationship right now. When I was in college at Michigan in the 60s, there was a great call to try to help work in the African American communities. And I heard that and went to work at Harlem for a couple of years after graduating from Michigan. I had amazing years working in Harlem as a teacher. Actually, yesterday, when I was there, I was very close to a family called the Albert Fan family. And yesterday I was on messaging with Albert Fan Jr., who's 52 years old. So that's how long those relationships have lasted. I remember when he was born, and he ended up being actually a star football player himself, and now as an entrepreneur. But it seems to me that there's now this kind of sense of, I guess it's called appropriation, and people are saying, well, don't get involved because it's up to people to do it themselves, and don't take credit for, getting into the world of it's any ethnic minorities. And there's this kind of sense, are people welcome? So could you comment on that and any changes you've seen on that? Should people feel that they are welcome still to come and try to help, and not feel like they're exploiting in that kind of terminology?
I think there's some things going on that are encouraging in that regard. For example, my class at Michigan, again, which Reggie helps me with almost every week as a volunteer, we are preparing students for careers as urban entrepreneurs who develop products or services that benefit people in an urban community, whatever color, ethnicity, but urban community. As part of teaching that class, I came into contact with an organization at the University of Michigan called the Detroit Neighborhood Engineering Project. And this is an organization at the University of Michigan that brings together resources from different colleges at University of Michigan, and has students working on projects with businesses, neighborhood businesses in Detroit. So helping with marketing, helping with technology, these kinds of things. So, those efforts are still going on. And I think that, I tend to subscribe to, after a long career of thinking of, people are people, right? And we are all human beings. I think that we have to work across these ethnic boundaries. But I think also from a policy standpoint, on a larger scale, we need to be looking at how can we revitalize, communities and recreate the kinds of situations that Reggie and I had growing up. Again, it's very simple. If people can have employment, if families can, make a living and do well, then their kids will do well. And so it hurts me to see, for example, we had these announcements of all these new electric vehicle facilities in Kentucky and Tennessee and places like that, places where there is no facility today, right? And the question I'm always asking myself is, why would it be so difficult to put something, facility like that, in a place like Flint? Even the places that General Motors announced in the last couple of weeks, Lansing and Detroit, but you don't
Auburn
see
Hills.
Auburn Hills, yeah. And so there is still a lot of industrial activity in this country. And I think from a policy standpoint, we are kind of geofencing places like Flint and Pontiac and Saginaw, and not creating those opportunities there. And then from a public sector point of view, we're not looking at how can we adjust these communities, how can we change these communities from an infrastructure standpoint so they will be places where people and companies want to go, right? I don't think we've done nearly enough in that regard.
David, you ought to write, that's a great term, you ought to write a little column for the Free Press or someplace on geofencing. I like, I don't know if you just made that up, but it's very good because it is what's happening.
Yeah.
We have a comment from a lovely lady from Monroe, Michigan, Hermelinda. You want to ask your question, Hermelinda?
Yes. So I was wondering how, so I like the discussion about giving young people access and giving them connections really that will last a lifetime because they need that base of support. A lot of the time, success is not necessarily due to how talented or how skilled you are, but if you have that ability to learn. And I think some people aren't giving those opportunities to learn the skill to do a job. They're judged based on what they have right now. And it's just that scarcity mindset that if I share this information with you or help you, and then I won't be able to excel or to succeed because only one of us can do it. So I think getting out of that mindset and getting access and getting those connections really can help us all thrive because we all learn from each other. We all can support each other and everybody can be successful. It doesn't have to just be one or two people, but that's really a mindset shift and it's more of an abundant way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you know when we've kind of we've evolved as a country, and but I think back to even though my mother went to the Grady Colored School of Nursing, right? She went there for free because she had to work in the hospital in order to be able to go to that school, right? So again, there was a trade-off of work for education, and she got her diploma from that school and ended up in a very successful career. My father learned electronics in the Army. He didn't have to spend, you know, $30,000 a year tuition, right, to get into that field. All of the students that went to General Motors Institute, including Mary Barra, you know, made money working their cooperative assignments, and that more than paid for tuition at General Motors Institute. So we had these pathways from, you know, into the middle class, much more than we do today. And I think whatever we can do in whatever policy area we're in, big or small, to recreate those kinds of opportunities for people to learn and to, you know, get into some field, I think, you know, that helps.
I had one more question for you guys too. So how did you, from that time period when you grew up, how did you deal with the racial disparity? Like who was your tribe? Who did you rely on for support when you felt like giving up because maybe you didn't have the opportunities that you saw other people having because you were a person of color? Like how did you manage that?
I'll take a crack at that. Number one, I think that any person of color should recognize that there's going to be an opportunity for you to face discrimination, racism, or any of those things that you mentioned. So you should expect that. You should also expect that you have to overcome those, and you should work on your abilities to navigate the system. I do not think that, unfortunately, in 2022, that there is this thing called color blindness or any of those things that people talk about. This is still a society where we have people that think there can be only one winner. The fact of life is there can be many winners, and there's no right answer, no wrong answer, but there can be many winners. And so I just have to tell you that number one, look and you will see winners of your color, of your race, of your net. ethnicity and make them your model, but also remember that you got to navigate the system.
I think a large part of our ability to deal with things too comes from our background in Flint. We had a really strong community. We had, we support each other. And I remember Reggie had this saying, I remember it all through college, right? Reggie would say, any class you're in, man, you're only competing against 25% of people because, 25% won't try and 25% something else, and 25%, you just better than them. So you're only competing against 25%. And so I kept that all throughout college. And I think wherever you are, it helps to have that community, that people that that love and support you. And I think that's why so many Black students nowadays are returning to HBCUs, historically Black universities, because they get that sense of community there that maybe they didn't have when they were in high school. But we had it. We had, again, we had a really great community in Flint, and I think that's where it starts.
I have a comment, a question. I had it when I was at Harvard. I had a professor. I was the only African American professor I had. Is Dr. Chester Pierce, very famous psychiatrist. He was at Harvard Medical School, and he always said something that intrigued me, which is that there's always a lot of room at the top. And I'm wondering if you gentlemen could comment on that. Reggie, you're nodding your head. What does that mean to you?
It kind of means what I think I said before. There is opportunity. There is no such thing as one winner. There's opportunity for multiple winners. As a matter of fact, the more people that win, the greater the opportunities come. And so if you fight through that middle group that's trying to hold people down, and you get up to that next level, you'll find that there's a lot of room up there because a lot of work needs to be done. A lot of things can be accomplished. And so I always tell everybody, work through that middle group because they're not rising and they want to keep other people down. Crabs in the barrel. That's what it means.
It's like break it through the line and you see that end zone in sight, right?
Plenty of room out here, yes.
I always notice how fast people seem to go once they break through the line. All of a sudden they go into another gear.
Absolutely.
Well, we probably should wrap up. This has been a fascinating conversation, and we'll give people last comments if you'd like, speakers, anybody else. But again, I already got a member of my group lined up. That is, and I'm looking forward to working with Demond Johnson on in integrating him into this group and some other people. So anybody who's in a leadership position, it doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, but just a leadership position, please think about joining. I have a couple of positions that are in there. I see one position online, a couple, David, and I think Matt Algelini is out there. So you guys think about this too. Any other comments, wrap ups, final words? I'll give you guys a chance to give final word, David and Reggie.
The only thing I got to say is I wish all of you good luck. As I've been speaking of as of late, there is opportunity out there. There's a chance for you to be a success story, and also reach back and pull someone else up as you ascend. Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll just say it was great, being with you all. And again, we could talk for hours, but I know some people got to work. And we are in the process of reconstituting and reinvigorating this urban entrepreneurship initiative. So if anybody's interested in seeing what that's about, they can go to urbanei.org and see what Urban Entrepreneurship Initiative is about. And 10 years ago this year, I published a book that detailed, my whole experience starting in Flint, going through Michigan, Bell Labs, and starting a business. It's called Proving Ground, a memoir. And I still do autographed copies of that book for anybody who's interested. And it's you can find that at provinggroundbook.com. So always have to try to throw a little commercial in there.
It's a great book that tells David's story in much more detail. It's a very inspiring story. So thank you very much, David. And if you need any advice on being a grandfather, I've got a 2-month-old grandson, so I know everything there is to know about.
Yeah.
2 months worth.
Is that your first one?
No, that's my third. I've got
Okay,
2
so
granddaughters in New York
you know what
City.
it's about.
Yeah.
All right.
Great experience. And thank you all. I see Dr. Eric Fretz out there, lots of great people. So thank you all for joining. Dr. Matt Angeluti,